Good evening, I'm Bret. Baier. A State Department official tells Fox News 3 diplomatic security agents and a contractor were among the Americans hurt during the September 11th attack on the U.S. mission in Benghazi, Libya. 4 Americans were killed, including the ambassador. In the following 6 months, precious little detail has emerged. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harrods reports tonight that may be starting to change.
For the first time since terrorists attacked the diplomatic mission and the CIA outpost known as the Annex in Benghazi, Libya, the State Department publicly confirmed how many of its employees were hurt and the nature of their injuries.
One with smoke inhalation at the temporary mission facility, one at the Annex who was seriously injured, and another at the Annex who was less seriously injured, and then we also had a contractor.
Separately, a diplomatic security source told Fox News the State Department agent who's in the most serious condition suffered a severe head injury during the second wave of the attack when the Annex came under RPG and mortar fire. In a recent interview with Fox's James Rosen, Secretary of State Kerry confirmed one State Department agent was being treated at Walter Reed as late as January.
I can tell you that I have visited with one of the survivors at Bethesda Hospital, who is a remarkably courageous person who is doing very, very well. And I've called his wife and talked to her.
6 months after Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 others were killed, leading Republicans in the House claim the administration is stonewalling their request to meet with survivors. Congressman Jason Chaffetz spoke to Fox from CPAC.
The State Department has not given us the names of those people that were attacked, that were there, that have firsthand knowledge of this information.
The State Department has not responded to this March 1st letter from Republican Congressman Frank Wolf, who supports a select committee investigation into Benghazi.
So I think we have an obligation to honor these people.
This week, another Republican threatened to subpoena the survivors if the State Department does not volunteer them to congressional investigators.
The U.S. Congress has every right to understand the details of what caused this assassination to be successful.
Fox News raised the access issue with the White House press secretary.
Is this White House preventing those survivors from speaking publicly or asking them not to?
First of all, I have no knowledge of this story. Secondly, I'm sure that the White House is not preventing anyone from speaking.
Asked why the information was only surfacing now, the State Department spokeswoman seemed to shut down the question.
No, you're not. We've been very clear about this from the very beginning.
Aside from the State Department employees, the CIA had about 24 personnel on the ground in Benghazi. Fox News is told there will now be congressional pressure for the agency to make its survivors available to investigators. Brad.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the lawmakers pushing hard for details about Benghazi is South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He and Senators John McCain and Kelly Ayotte are asking informal letters to Secretary of State John Kerry and CIA Director John Brennan for them to provide the names of all of the attack survivors. Senator Graham spoke with me today about the effort and started by telling me he has met with some of the survivors.
I've had contact with some of the survivors. Their story is chilling. They feel afraid to tell it. It's important they come forward to tell their story. The best evidence of what happened in Benghazi is not a bunch of politicians in Washington trying to cover their political ass. It's the people who lived through the debacle. And I'm going to do everything I can to get them before the Congress and the American people in an appropriate fashion so that we can learn firsthand what happened in Benghazi. You ask me why are they not being forthcoming? I think it's Exhibit A of a failed foreign policy. I think the Benghazi debacle before, during, and after shows what happens when you lead from behind. Al-Qaeda is not on the run. Bin Laden may be dead, but Al-Qaeda is alive and well all over the region, and Benghazi's example of that.
Are these survivors back on the job?
Some are back, working for the government. Some are still injured. The bottom line is they feel that they cannot come forward. They've been told to be quiet. And at the end of the day, we can't let this administration or any other administration get away with hiding from the American people and the Congress, people who were there in real time to tell the story. Again, what Susan Rice told the American people 5 days after the attack has collapsed. What the President told the American people for weeks after the attack makes no sense. This was never a spontaneous event caused by a hateful video. It was always a pre-planned terrorist attack.
What are they telling you?
The American people need to hear what happened that night. They need to hear from the people who are on the ground their desperate situation. They need to understand from the people who were there for months how bad it was getting and how frustrated they were that nobody would listen to them and provide aid when they were requested. This is a story of an administration deaf and blind to the reality of what people were living with every day in Libya. It is important that they be able to tell their story without reprisal. I think if they get to tell their story without fear, we will understand that during that night they felt abandoned, and they will tell us very clearly that the threats were building for months and nobody would listen to them. It's imperative that they tell their story.
There was a big CIA operation there, as we have reported on. We actually don't know the extent of what was going on. A lot of those people obviously will not talk because they're undercover. How much does that factor into all of this equation?
Well, Congress has an oversight role. If you have a CIA operative and you want to know what happened that night, then do it in a classified setting. Make a record so that we can learn from the mistakes and not repeat them. There are a lot of people there who could testify publicly. I'm not asking the administration to turn over witnesses to the Congress to compromise intelligence. I'm asking the administration to turn over to the Congress and the American people the witnesses, the people who lived through this, so we can learn from our mistakes. And quite frankly, they're hiding from the American people and the Congress the primary source of the truth in Benghazi, the people who lived through it.
Why was Ambassador Stevens in Benghazi if he had been sending up all of those memos and cables that the place was essentially security unsustainable? Why was he there?
Because that's where the action was regarding the rising Islamic extremists who are trying to get their hands on weapons that are flowing freely in Libya. We were desperately trying to control the anti-aircraft missiles, the man-pads, that were all over Libya, that are now all over the Mideast. Chris Stevens got outside the wire because it was his job. Don't blame the soldier when he's going outside the wire to do his job. Blame the commander who creates the bad environment for the soldier. There was violence all over Benghazi months before September the 11th. The British left Benghazi. They chose wisely. We chose poorly. The person I blame is not Chris Stevens. I blame the President of the United States.
Secretary Clinton said, "Why does it matter?" In that hearing. Others have said that this is a political effort on your part to get points before your re-election. That's what they say. You've heard it.
Yeah, but nobody said that about me and Senator McCain when we're asking the Bush administration to tell us the truth about Iraq. It wasn't a few dead enders. We challenged the construct that everything was going fine in Iraq, that we didn't need a surge of troops. We challenged the interrogation policies of the Bush administration because it mattered to me to make sure that when we're at war that the truth comes out and we make appropriate adjustments. To Secretary Clinton, Madam Secretary, here's why it matters. I want to know why the system got so broken that you could not understand what was being said in Libya, and that when our ambassador tells your State Department on your watch we can't defend the consulate from a terrorist attack, and oh, by the way, Benghazi is full of al-Qaeda flags, how could you not read that input? How could you not get that input? I want to understand from our military clearly why in 7.5 hours could you not help these poor people? And I want to understand how the Obama administration could have ever come up with a story this was anything other than a terrorist attack from the beginning. It had nothing to do with the video. We're not going to cover up a failed foreign policy episode and read in the New York Times all of the successes of the Obama administration. You cannot have a country where the commander-in-chief gets to celebrate his successes and hide his failures.
You think we'll get to the bottom of it?
If we do not have these survivors come forward in an appropriate way, I will continue to make life difficult in the Senate, and I am begging my House colleagues, if they will not voluntarily release the names of these survivors to the Congress for appropriate interviews to get to the bottom of what happened in Benghazi, that you subpoena them. House Republicans, Jason Chaffetz, Frank Wolf, have done a great job, but to our leadership in the House, you're going to have to up your game on Benghazi.
What is the end of this? If you have people testify and people find out things, what do you think the end game is?
Well, I think if we knew the truth about Benghazi, some people would be fired. Nobody's been fired. And quite frankly, as to Secretary Clinton, she's going to be able to talk about her successes as Secretary of State, and she had some, no doubt about it, but she's going to have to account for her failures. And it really does matter to make sure that the record is clear about what happened on her watch and what happened on President Obama's watch. So the end game for me is to get into the truth, and if we do get to the truth and no one gets fired, it will be unbelievably inappropriate to allow people to keep their jobs who let the people in Benghazi down so badly. And as to Secretary Clinton, you cannot tell the American people you had a clear-eyed view of the threats in Benghazi, given what I know. And what I know comes from the people who were there, and it's time for the people who were there to tell the American people what happened.
Our thanks to Senator Graham. Log on to our homepage at foxnews.com/special report. Click on the video tab there, and you can see the full interview with Senator Graham. And then this question: do you think we will ever know the whole story on Benghazi? We are staying on this story, as you can see. Let me know on Twitter. You can follow me at Bret Baier. Next.